If you can't even do your job right, maybe you don't belong here." The words cut through the polished glass lobby like a crack in something too perfect to break, and every head turned just in time to see Lily Monroe standing frozen in front of the reception desk, her cheeks burning under the harsh white lights as her manager's voice echoed louder than it needed to be, louder than it should have been, louder than she deserved. She clutched the folder in her hands tighter, knuckles pale, knowing the numbers inside were right, knowing she had double-checked everything after staying up until 2 a.m. at her tiny apartment while her 4-year-old daughter slept on the couch beside her, knowing she hadn't made a mistake, and yet here she was, being looked at like she had just cost the company millions. I didn't," she started, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be, but it didn't matter because the whispers had already begun, quiet but sharp, sliding between co-workers standing nearby, people who just minutes ago had been smiling over coffee now, watching her like she was a problem they were glad wasn't theirs. Behind her, unnoticed by almost everyone, a man in a Navy maintenance uniform leaned slightly on a mop, his posture relaxed but his eyes steady, observing everything with a calm that didn't match the tension in the room. Lily felt it before she saw it, the weight of being watched, and for a split second, she turned, her gaze brushing past him without really seeing him. Just another janitor in a building full of people who cleaned up messes no one else wanted to touch. "You handed this report to the client," her manager snapped, tapping the folder sharply against the counter. "And now they're asking questions I shouldn't have to answer." Lily swallowed, her mind racing, replaying every line, every figure, every detail, trying to find the error that wasn't there, while her phone buzzed softly in her purse, a vibration that made her stomach tighten because she knew exactly who it was, her babysitter, and she knew that a call during work hours never meant anything good. She hesitated, just for a second, torn between the crisis in front of her and the one waiting on the other end of that call, and that hesitation cost her, because her manager let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Unbelievable. You're not even focused." The words landed harder than the accusation itself, and Lily felt the familiar wave of embarrassment rise, the kind that made her wish she could disappear, just for a moment, just long enough for everyone to forget she existed. Behind her, the janitor straightened slightly, his gaze shifting from the manager to Lily, then briefly to the folder in her hands. As if something about this moment mattered more than it should have, Lily forced herself to stand taller, even as her heart pounded. "If there's a mistake, I'll fix it," she said, her voice steadier now, though it took everything in her to hold it together, because she couldn't afford to lose this job. Not when rent was due in 6 days. Not when her daughter needed new shoes she'd been pretending still fit. Not when every dollar already had a purpose before it even reached her account. The lobby felt smaller somehow, the air tighter, the silence heavier as her manager looked at her like he was deciding something that didn't include her side of the story. And just as Lily opened her mouth again, the janitor stepped forward slightly, his shoes making the faintest sound against the polished floor, not enough to draw attention, not enough to interrupt, but enough that, for reasons she couldn't explain, Lily felt it. A shift, subtle but real, like the moment before something changes and you don't yet know how or why. She didn't look at him this time, didn't think to, because to her he was still just part of the background, someone invisible in a world that only noticed titles and suits and voices loud enough to command a room. And as her manager inhaled, clearly preparing to say something that would push this moment even further, the janitor's eyes lingered on Lily for a fraction longer, thoughtful, almost familiar, as if he had been waiting for this exact scene to unfold, as if this wasn't the first time he had seen her stand there, trying to hold everything together while the world quietly decided whether she was worth keeping around. And somewhere, beneath the humiliation, beneath the pressure, beneath the noise of judgment pressing in from every direction, Lily had the strangest, fleeting feeling that someone in that room saw more than her mistake, even if she had no idea who or why. The silence did not last long, because in places like this, silence never protected anyone. It only made room for decisions to be made faster, colder, and without hesitation, and Lily could see it in the way her manager's expression shifted from irritation to something final, something that did not invite discussion, something that meant she was about to lose more than just her pride. Her phone buzzed again, longer this time, more urgent, and she could almost hear her babysitter's anxious voice through the vibration alone. But she did not dare reach for it. Not now, not in front of everyone, not when every move she made felt like it was being measured. "You know what?" her manager said, exhaling sharply. "We will revisit your position after I speak with the client. But for now, I suggest you step aside before you make this worse." The words were dressed like a temporary decision, but everyone in the room understood what they really meant, and the subtle shift in people's posture around her confirmed it. The quiet distancing, the way eyes moved away just quickly enough to avoid being caught watching too closely. Lily nodded once, because she had learned that arguing rarely helped when the outcome had already been decided. And as she turned to leave, her grip tightened around the folder like it was the only thing still connecting her to the version of herself that had believed she was finally getting somewhere. The janitor stepped back slightly to give her space as she passed, but this time, her shoulder brushed against his arm, and she stopped for just a fraction of a second, not because she recognized him, but because something about his presence felt steady in a way everything else in that moment did not, and that steadiness irritated her more than it comforted her. She let out a quiet breath, shaking her head as if to clear it, and muttered, "Maybe if people focused on their actual jobs, things would not fall apart like this." The words slipped out sharper than she intended, directed more at the situation than at him. But they landed anyway, and for a brief moment, the janitor's gaze held hers, not offended, not defensive, just aware, as if he understood more than she wanted him to. Lily looked away first, already regretting the comment, but too overwhelmed to fix it, and she kept walking, her heels echoing softly against the polished floor as she moved toward the exit. Once outside the lobby, the noise of the building dulled behind the glass doors, and she finally pulled her phone from her purse, her heart sinking the second she saw the missed calls and the text message waiting on the screen. "Call me back. It is Emma. She has a fever again." The words blurred slightly as she read them, and for a moment, everything else disappeared, the embarrassment, the job, the stares, all of it replaced by a single, sharp fear that cut through her chest. She pressed the phone to her ear, pacing a few steps along the sidewalk, her voice low but urgent as the call connected, asking questions, listening, calculating distances, time, money, every detail stacking up in her mind faster than she could sort through them. Behind the glass doors, unseen by her, the janitor had not returned to his work right away, his gaze following her as she stood outside, one hand pressed against her forehead, the other gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. And something in his expression shifted again, subtle but deliberate, as if a decision had just been made, not impulsive, not emotional, but precise, like someone who had been waiting for the right moment to act, and had just found it. The call ended too quickly for Lily's comfort, the kind of ending that did not resolve anything, but only replaced one fear with another, and she stood there for a moment on the sidewalk, staring at the screen as if it might change its message if she looked long enough, as if her daughter's fever might somehow drop without her being there, as if everything could just pause until she figured out how to hold it all together. She exhaled slowly, pressing her lips together, already calculating how long it would take to get across town, whether the bus would be fast enough, whether she could afford a ride, whether she still even had a job to justify asking for time off. And that last thought hit harder than the rest because it meant the ground beneath her was no longer stable. It was shifting, uncertain, ready to give way at any moment. She turned back toward the building, hesitating at the glass doors, her reflection staring back at her, tired, composed, but barely, and for a second she almost walked away entirely, almost chose her daughter over everything else without explanation or permission. But she knew how that would look, how quickly that decision would close doors she might never reopen, and so she pushed the door open again and stepped inside. The lobby had settled into a quieter rhythm, conversations lower, movement more controlled, as if the earlier scene had already been absorbed into the building's routine. But the memory of it still lingered in the air, subtle but present, and Lily felt it as she walked past the reception desk, the brief glances, the quick shifts of attention, the unspoken awareness that she had become part of the day's story. She kept her gaze forward, focusing on reaching the elevator, focusing on the next step, because thinking too far ahead felt impossible. Near the far wall, the janitor was back at work, pushing the mop in slow, even strokes. The steady motion almost deliberate in its calm, and as Lily passed him again, she hesitated just slightly, not enough to draw attention, but enough that she heard her own voice before she could stop it. Quieter now, less sharp. I did not mean what I said earlier. The words were simple, not polished, but real, and for a moment she did not look at him, as if saying it without eye contact made it easier. The janitor paused, the mop stilling against the floor, and when Lily finally glanced up, his expression had not changed much, still composed, still unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made her feel like he had already moved past the moment she was still standing in. "It is a stressful day," he said calmly, his voice low but clear, not defensive, not dismissive, just steady. And that steadiness caught her off guard again because it felt out of place, like it belonged somewhere else, somewhere higher than this lobby, somewhere that did not involve cleaning floors. Lily nodded once, unsure what else to say, and for a second, she almost explained everything, almost told him about the call, about her daughter, about the way everything seemed to be slipping at the same time, but she stopped herself, because none of that belonged here, none of it mattered to someone like him, and she turned toward the elevator again. Just as the door slid open, a voice echoed from behind her, sharp and hurried. "Lily, wait." She turned instinctively, her pulse quickening as one of the senior assistants approached quickly, her expression tight with urgency. "The client is asking for you specifically." The words did not sound like relief, they sounded like pressure, like something unresolved had just been pulled back into the center of the room. Lily blinked, caught between confusion and dread. "For me," she repeated, and the assistant nodded, already gesturing toward the conference wing. "They want clarification before they escalate this further." The phrase "settle this further" hung heavier than anything her manager had said earlier, and Lily felt the weight of it settle into her chest as she turned in that direction. Behind her, unnoticed, the janitor watched her go, his gaze following her with quiet focus. And as the assistant disappeared around the corner with Lily just behind her, he reached into his pocket briefly, his fingers brushing against something unseen, before letting his hand fall back to his side, his expression thoughtful, controlled, and just for a moment, something almost like recognition passed through his eyes, as if this situation was unfolding exactly as expected, or perhaps exactly as planned. The walk to the conference wing felt longer than it should have, every step echoing louder in Lily's mind than it did against the carpeted floor, and by the time she reached the glass doors, her heart had settled into that sharp, steady rhythm that came from knowing there was no way out except forward. The assistant pushed the door open and gestured for her to enter, and the moment Lily stepped inside, she felt the shift immediately. The room colder, more controlled, the kind of space where every word mattered and every mistake stayed longer than it should. 3 people sat at the far end of the table, their expressions neutral but focused, the kind of neutral that did not mean calm. It meant judgment held just beneath the surface, waiting. Her manager stood near the screen, arms crossed, already watching her like he had been expecting this moment, like he had been preparing for it. "Ms. Monroe," one of the clients said, his voice even, professional, but edged with impatience. "We were told you prepared the report we received this morning." Lily nodded, stepping closer to the table, setting the folder down carefully, as if precision in small movements could somehow balance the weight of everything else. "Yes, I did," she answered, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "Then perhaps you can explain why the projections on page 12 contradict the data summary on page 4. The man continued, sliding a printed copy across the table toward her, and Lily's eyes moved quickly over the numbers, her mind clicking into place, focusing, analyzing, blocking out everything else the way she had trained herself to do, because this part she understood, this part she could control. For a moment, the room faded, replaced by columns of data, by logic, by patterns that either aligned or did not. And then she saw it, not a mistake, but a formatting shift, a versioning issue, something that had been altered after her final submission. She looked up, meeting her manager's gaze for just a second, and something in his expression flickered, subtle but there, before he masked it again. "Those numbers were updated after I finalized my version," Lily said carefully, choosing each word with precision. The summary reflects the corrected dataset, but the projection page was not refreshed to match. The client leaned back slightly, considering, while another flipped through the pages, verifying, and the silence stretched just long enough to feel like a test. "So you were saying the report we received was incomplete?" the first client asked, and Lily shook her head once. "I am saying the version you received was not the one I submitted." Her voice did not rise, did not falter, and for the first time since the morning began, she felt a small shift, not victory, but footing, something solid beneath her. Her manager stepped in quickly, his tone smooth, controlled. "What matters is that we correct it now." But the client's attention did not return to him immediately. It stayed on Lily, assessing, measuring, as if recalculating something beyond just the report. "Can you fix it?" the client asked, direct now, and Lily nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I can have a corrected version within 30 minutes. The answer came faster than she had planned, but it felt right. It felt necessary, because anything less would sound like uncertainty, and uncertainty was the one thing she could not afford right now. The client exchanged a brief look with the others, then gave a short nod. "Then do it." And just like that, the decision shifted again, not resolved, but redirected, and Lily felt the pressure tighten rather than release, because now the responsibility was fully hers, the chance to fix everything or lose it completely. As she gathered the papers and turned to leave, her manager's voice followed her, lower now, meant only for her. "You have 30 minutes. And there was something in the way he said it that felt less like support and more like a challenge, like he expected her to fail under the weight of it. Lily stepped back into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her, and for a second she stood still, her mind already racing through the corrections, the files, the steps she needed to take, while somewhere deeper, the image of her daughter flickered again, the fever, the urgency waiting beyond this building. Down the corridor, near the edge of the lobby where the conference wing opened back into the main floor, the janitor stood once more, not working this time, just watching quietly as Lily emerged, and though she did not notice him, his gaze followed her with the same steady focus, as if he had already anticipated this turn, as if the next move in this unfolding situation was already decided, even if no one else in the room yet realized it. The moment Lily stepped into her small office cubicle, the world narrowed into a single objective: fix the report, because everything else, the humiliation, the whispers, the fear in her chest about her daughter, all of it had to wait, at least for the next 30 minutes. She dropped her bag onto the chair, her fingers already moving across the keyboard before she even fully sat down, pulling up the latest files, tracing timestamps, versions, edits, her mind moving faster now, sharper under pressure, the way it always did when there was no room left for doubt. The discrepancy revealed itself clearly within seconds. The projection sheet had been pulled from an earlier dataset, one that had not included the final adjustments she had submitted late last night, and for a moment, a flicker of relief passed through her, because she had been right. She had not made the mistake they accused her of, but that relief did not last, because being right did not undo what had already happened. It did not erase the way she had been spoken to. It did not guarantee that anyone would admit it. She corrected the formulas, recalculated the projections, aligned every figure with precision, her eyes scanning each column twice, then a third time, because she could not afford even the smallest error now, not when every second counted, not when her phone sat beside her, silent for the moment, but heavy with everything it represented. Outside her cubicle, movement picked up again, coworkers passing by, voices low but curious, and she could feel it, the attention that pretended not to exist, the awareness that she was being watched without being acknowledged. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and just as she prepared to finalize the updated file, her screen flickered briefly, a small delay that made her pause, her fingers hovering above the keys, and then the system refreshed, but something was off. The updated figures she had just entered did not match what she remembered typing. The alignment was wrong again, slightly, but enough to matter. Her stomach tightened, and she quickly retraced her steps, checking formulas, checking inputs. But the changes she had just made were no longer there in the way she had left them, replaced by something older, something incorrect. "No," she whispered under her breath, her pulse quickening, because this was not a simple error. This was something else, something deliberate or at least careless in a way that felt targeted. And as she worked faster now, trying to correct it again, her manager appeared at the edge of her cubicle, his presence quiet but heavy. "Time is running out," he said, his tone measured. But there was something beneath it, something that felt almost expectant, as if he was waiting for her to fall short. Lily did not look up, her focus locked on the screen. "I am almost done," she replied, her voice tight but controlled, and she could feel him watching her for a moment longer before he stepped away, leaving behind that same pressure, that same sense that this situation was being shaped in a way she did not fully control. She forced herself to slow down just enough to be precise, correcting the formulas again, double-checking every link between sheets. And this time, she saved the file locally before syncing it, creating a version she could trust, something that could not be altered without her knowing. 25 minutes. She checked the time, then hit save again, her heart pounding as she attached the corrected file to an email, her fingers hesitating for just a fraction of a second before she hit send, because once it left her hands, she had no control over what happened next. Across the floor, near the far end of the open workspace, the janitor moved quietly between desks, emptying trash bins, adjusting chairs, his presence blending into the background so completely that no one noticed how his gaze shifted occasionally toward Lily's screen, toward the subtle flicker that had interrupted her work moments earlier, toward the way her system had behaved in a way that did not match normal operation. He paused briefly near a terminal, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk, and for a second, his expression changed, thoughtful, precise, as if confirming something he had already suspected. When he moved again, it was with the same calm rhythm as before, but there was a quiet certainty in his steps now, the kind that came from understanding more than anyone else in the room, the kind that suggested this was no longer just a problem to observe, but one that was about to be answered in a way no one was expecting. The email left her outbox, but the tension did not leave her chest. It only shifted, settling deeper, heavier, because now everything depended on how that file would be received, and Lily sat there for a moment longer than she should have, staring at the screen as if it might respond back, as if it might tell her whether she had just saved her job or quietly sealed its end. Her phone buzzed again, sharper this time, and she grabbed it instantly, stepping away from her desk as she answered, her voice low but urgent. "How is she?" And the answer came in fragments that made her heart tighten. The fever had not gone down. The babysitter was worried, and Lily's mind split in two directions at once. One still anchored to the office, to the report, to the fragile thread of her position, and the other already moving toward her daughter, toward the small apartment across town where a 4-year-old lay too warm under thin blankets. "I will be there as soon as I can," she said finally, the promise coming out stronger than she felt. And when the call ended, she stood still for a second, her eyes closing briefly as if she could hold everything together just by refusing to let it fall apart. Behind her, the office carried on, unaware or uninterested, the rhythm of keyboards, muted conversations, the low hum of a place that continued regardless of who was struggling inside it. She returned to her desk just as her manager approached again, his expression unreadable but his posture tense. "The client received your update," he said, and for a moment, Lily felt a flicker of hope, but it faded quickly when he continued. "They are asking why the discrepancy happened in the first place." The question hung between them, heavier than anything before, because it was no longer about fixing the mistake. It was about assigning responsibility for it. Lily met his gaze, her voice steady despite everything pressing against her. "Because the version they received was not mine," she said again, more clearly this time, and for a brief second, something in his expression tightened, almost imperceptibly, before smoothing out again. "That is a serious claim," he replied, his tone lower now, controlled, but edged with warning. "You should be very certain before you repeat it." Lily felt the pressure behind those words, the unspoken suggestion to step back, to soften her stance, to accept part of the blame for the sake of resolution. But she could not do that. Not now, not when too much depended on it. "I am certain," she answered, and the silence that followed felt different this time, sharper, more focused. Across the office, a few heads turned slightly, sensing the shift even if they did not know the details. And Lily became aware again of how exposed she was, how easily this moment could turn against her. Her manager exhaled slowly, then nodded once. "We'll review the system logs," he said. And though it sounded procedural, there was something in the way he said it that felt like a risk, like opening a door that might not close the way he expected. At the far end of the workspace, near the row of unused terminals, the janitor paused again, his hand resting lightly against the back of a chair as he listened without appearing to, his attention drawn not to the conversation itself, but to the decision that had just been made. System logs meant records, timestamps, access points, traces that did not lie the way people could. And for the first time since the morning began, something shifted beneath the surface of the situation, something that moved beyond perception and into proof. Lily felt it too, though she could not fully explain why. A subtle change in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks or clears, and as she sat back down, waiting, watching, her phone resting beside her like a reminder of everything outside this building that still needed her, she realized that whatever happened next would not stay contained within quiet conversations or polite corrections. It would surface, it would be seen, and when it did, it would not just reveal what went wrong. It would reveal who made it happen. And somewhere behind the quiet movements of routine, the janitor straightened slightly, his expression calm but resolved, as if the moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived, and whatever came next was no longer a matter of chance, but of timing. The waiting stretched longer than it should have, long enough for every quiet sound in the office to sharpen into something noticeable, the tapping of keys, the hum of overhead lights, the distant ring of a phone that no one rushed to answer. And Lily sat at her desk with her hands folded too tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the edge of her monitor as if moving even slightly might break whatever fragile balance still held her place here together. She checked the time again, not because she needed to know, but because it gave her something to do, something that felt like control, even if it was only an illusion. And with every passing minute, the image of her daughter returned more vividly, small, flushed, waiting, and the weight of not being there pressed harder against her chest. Across the office, her manager moved in and out of a closed glass room, speaking quietly with someone on the phone, his posture rigid, his tone controlled. And though Lily could not hear the words, she could read the tension in the way he paced, the way he paused between sentences as if choosing each one carefully. Then, without warning, the elevator doors at the far end of the floor opened with a soft chime that seemed louder than usual, drawing more attention than it should have, and a man stepped out quickly, dressed in a dark suit, his expression focused, his pace purposeful in a way that immediately shifted the atmosphere around him. Conversations lowered without being told, heads turned slightly, and even those who pretended not to notice adjusted their posture, as if recognizing the presence of someone who operated on a different level. The man did not stop at the reception area, did not greet anyone. He moved straight across the floor with quiet urgency, his gaze scanning briefly before locking onto a point that Lily could not yet see. And as he passed her desk, she caught a fragment of his voice, low but clear. "Where is he?" The question was not loud, but it carried, and it did not sound like a request. It sounded like a demand. Lily frowned slightly, her attention pulled away from her own situation for the first time in several minutes. Because something about the tone did not match the usual hierarchy she had come to understand. It was sharper, more immediate, less concerned with protocol. Her manager stepped out of the glass room just as the man approached, and for a brief moment, the two stood facing each other, and Lily saw something she had not seen before. Her manager hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before speaking. "We are in the middle of a client issue," he began, but the man did not acknowledge it, his gaze moving past him, scanning the floor again with a precision that felt deliberate. "I asked where he is," he repeated, and this time, there was no mistaking the authority behind the words. It was not loud, it was not aggressive, but it was absolute. A subtle shift moved through the room, small but unmistakable, like a ripple that passed from one person to another without anyone speaking it aloud. And Lily felt it even from where she sat, her attention sharpening despite herself. Her manager cleared his throat slightly, his voice lower now, more careful. "Maintenance is on this level," he said. gesturing vaguely toward the far end of the floor, and the suited man nodded once, already turning in that direction without another word. Lily followed his movement with her eyes, her confusion growing, because nothing about this interaction made sense within the structure she understood, and as the man walked past rows of desks toward the quieter edge of the workspace, where the janitor had been working, the air seemed to hold for a moment, as if everyone was waiting for something they could not yet define. Near the corner, the janitor had paused again, his posture unchanged, his expression calm, as if the approaching presence had not altered his rhythm at all. And when the suited man stopped in front of him, the silence that followed felt heavier than any noise, not because something had happened, but because something was about to, and Lily, without fully understanding why, found herself leaning forward slightly, her breath held just enough to notice that everything in the room had shifted, not dramatically, not visibly, but undeniably, like the moment before a truth is spoken that cannot be taken back. The silence held for a fraction longer than anyone expected, long enough for uncertainty to ripple quietly through the room. And then the suited man spoke, his voice low but clear. "Mr. Blake, the board has been waiting." And the words landed with a weight that did not match the situation everyone thought they were witnessing, because the man he was addressing still stood there in a Navy maintenance uniform, one hand resting lightly on the handle of a mop, his posture relaxed, almost indifferent. For a second, nothing moved, no one spoke, and Lily felt her breath catch without understanding why, because the name did not fit, the tone did not fit, none of it aligned with the image her mind had already accepted. Then the janitor straightened slowly, not hurried, not surprised, just deliberate, as if this moment had been expected all along. And when he turned fully toward the suited man, something shifted in the way he held himself, subtle but unmistakable, the kind of shift that did not come from changing clothes or titles, but from revealing what had always been there beneath the surface. "I was finishing something," he said calmly, his voice carrying just enough to reach the surrounding desks. And it was the same voice Lily had heard earlier, steady and composed, but now it carried a different weight, one that made the air around him feel different, heavier, more defined. The suited man nodded immediately, not questioning, not challenging, and stepped slightly to the side, as if making space rather than taking it. And that small gesture alone was enough to break whatever illusion remained. Across the office, people began to shift, chairs moving quietly, conversation stopping completely now, eyes no longer pretending not to look, because something had just been revealed that did not fit into the structure they had all been operating under. Lily stared, her mind struggling to catch up with what she was seeing, replaying every interaction in quick, fragmented flashes, the quiet presence behind her in the lobby, the calm response when she had spoken too sharply, the steady observation that had felt out of place but she had ignored. And now all of it rearranged itself into something she could not immediately process. Her manager stepped forward, his expression tightening in a way she had never seen before, his voice lower, more controlled than usual. "Mr. Blake, we were not informed you would be on site today." And there was something in the way he said it that sounded less like a statement and more like a miscalculation. Adrian Blake's gaze moved to him briefly, not dismissive, not confrontational, just precise. "I prefer to see things as they are," he replied, and the simplicity of the statement carried more meaning than a longer explanation ever could. The suited man spoke again, quieter this time. "The board meeting is ready. Whenever you are." And Adrian nodded once, then took a step forward, leaving the mop leaning against the wall without a second glance, as if it had never defined him in the first place. As he moved past the rows of desks, the space seemed to part around him without being asked, people stepping back instinctively, not out of fear, but out of recognition of something they had failed to see. When he reached the center of the floor, his gaze shifted again, this time landing on Lily, and for a moment, everything else faded. The room, the people, the tension, all of it narrowing into that single point of contact. Lily felt it immediately, the weight of that look, not harsh, not judging, but knowing in a way that made her chest tighten, because it carried something she could not yet name. Her thoughts scrambled, searching for something to say, something to explain, something to undo the way she had spoken to him earlier. But no words came. only the realization that everything she had assumed had been wrong. Adrian paused for just a second, long enough that the moment could not be ignored, and then, in a voice low enough that it did not carry across the entire room, but strong enough that it reached her clearly, he said, "We will address your report shortly." And the choice of words, your report, not the report, not the issue, but yours, shifted something again, subtle but significant. Then he turned away, continuing toward the conference wing with the suited man following half a step behind, and the room remained suspended in silence for a moment longer before the noise returned in fragments, whispers, movements, the quiet unraveling of everything that had just been revealed. Lily remained where she was, her hands still, her thoughts racing, her understanding catching up in uneven pieces, because the man she had dismissed, the man she had spoken to without a second thought, had just walked past her not as someone invisible, but as the one person in the building who could change everything. And somewhere beneath the shock, beneath the confusion, one question rose above the rest, not about his title, not about his presence, but about the way he had looked at her, as if this was not the first time their paths had crossed, as if there was something more she had not yet remembered. The noise returned slowly, uneven and uncertain, like the office itself was trying to recover from something it had not been prepared to witness, and Lily remained at her desk, her body still but her mind moving in fragments, replaying every moment from the morning with a clarity that had not been there before. The janitor standing behind her in the lobby, the calm voice that had not reacted to her frustration, the steady presence that now felt deliberate rather than incidental, her fingers curled slightly against the edge of her desk as the realization settled deeper, heavier, because it was not just that she had been wrong. It was that she had completely misunderstood who had been standing right in front of her the entire time. Across the floor, her manager moved quickly toward the conference wing, his earlier confidence replaced by something tighter, more controlled. And for the first time since she had started working here, Lily saw uncertainty in the way he carried himself. A subtle hesitation that did not belong to someone used to being in charge. Whispers spread quietly through the office, fragments of speculation, disbelief, questions that no one had answers to yet, and Lily felt herself at the center of something she had not intended to be part of, something larger than a report or a mistake, something that had shifted the entire balance of the room. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her back for a brief second, and she glanced at the screen, another message about her daughter. The fever still high, the urgency unchanged, and the contrast between the two worlds pressed against her chest. The one here, controlled, structured, suddenly unstable, and the one waiting for her across town, immediate, real, needing her in a way nothing in this office ever would. She inhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay present, at least for a few moments longer, because she knew leaving now without understanding what had just happened might cost her everything she had been trying to hold on to. The conference room door remained closed, but the tension around it was visible even from a distance, people glancing toward it, conversations pausing whenever someone stepped closer, as if everyone was waiting for the outcome of a conversation they could not hear but somehow knew would matter. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last, and then the door opened, not abruptly, but with a quiet certainty that drew every eye in the room. Adrian Blake stepped out first, his expression composed, unchanged, as if the shift in identity had not altered him at all, as if this was simply another part of a role he had always carried. Behind him, the suited man followed, along with Lily's manager, whose posture had shifted again, straighter now but careful, measured in a way that spoke of recalculation rather than control. Adrian paused just outside the room, his gaze moving across the floor once more, not hurried, not searching, but deliberate, as if taking in the space with a clarity no one else in the room possessed, and then his eyes found Lily again. The moment held, quieter than before but more defined, because now she understood what she was looking at, or at least part of it, and the weight of that understanding made it harder to breathe. Evenly, he took a step toward her, not enough to close the distance entirely, but enough that the space between them felt intentional, chosen, and when he spoke, his voice carried just enough to reach her without becoming a spectacle for the rest of the room. The system logs confirm your version was not altered by you. The statement was simple, direct, but it cut through everything that had happened earlier, clearing a path where there had only been accusation before. Lily blinked, the words settling slowly, because they did not just clear her name. They exposed something else, something that had yet to be said aloud. Adrian's gaze held hers for a moment longer, and there was something in it now that felt different, not just awareness, but recognition, the kind that reached backward rather than forward, as if this moment was connected to something she had not yet remembered. "You should go," he added quietly, his tone shifting just slightly, not authority now, but something closer to understanding. "Your daughter needs you." And the words hit harder than anything else he had said, because she had not told him that. Not directly, not clearly, and yet he knew. Lily's breath caught, her thoughts scrambling to connect the pieces, the way he had noticed, the way he had been present, the way he had spoken as if her situation mattered beyond this building. And for a second, she almost asked the question forming in her mind, the one that felt bigger than everything else. But the moment moved before she could. Adrian turned slightly, already stepping back toward the conference room, but he paused just enough to glance at her one last time, and in a voice low enough that only she could hear, he said, "You still have not recognized me, have you?" The question did not demand an answer. It opened something, a door she had not realized was there. And as he disappeared back into the room, leaving behind a silence that felt different from before, Lily stood there with that question echoing in her mind, because whatever came next was no longer just about a job, or a mistake, or a misunderstanding. It was about something she had missed entirely, something that had been standing in front of her all along, waiting to be seen.